Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt. We're presented by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, along with my co-host, Damon Parrish. We're going to be here for the next hour talking about criminal justice issues and any other issues you want to discuss with us. We'll open our phone lines at 8:30, and we'll flash the number up at the bottom of the screen. We'll also take your questions and any comments you have on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. Tonight, our guests, we have the current HCCLA president, JoAnne Musick, joining us, and we have a little bit of a change at the last minute. We were supposed to have fellow HCCLA member Mac Miller on, but Mac couldn't join us this evening, so we have replacement HCCLA member Justin Harris joining us this evening. Guys, welcome to the show. Appreciate it. How's everybody doing this evening?
Doing great. Thank you.
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well.
Right,
It's been a pretty good week so far. Can't complain. A lot of stuff happening, guys. I want to jump to the first thing. Big news coming out of Fort Bend County, and that is District Attorney John Healy having a professional misconduct lawsuit filed against him by the state bar. And we really haven't seen a whole lot of this in recent history. And now we not only get Charles Sebesta, but right on his heels now we get the Healy petition. JoAnne, what's your thoughts on this? This is a big deal. This is a big deal.
It certainly is a big deal. It's very unique. It's not something that happens on a regular basis. We are seeing a little shift, and perhaps this is after the Sunset Commission reviews a few years ago, but we're seeing a little shift in the State Bar Grievance Committee, and they're actually going after prosecutors now who fail to fulfill their obligations as a prosecutor.
And Damon, if I understand correctly, I'm not personally familiar with the case, but as I understand it, he and another ADA in the has also been filed against him. Mark Hanna has also had a complaint filed against him for withholding evidence on and not timely turning over forensic evidence on a case. Is that your understanding as well?
And it was, yes, and it was 8 months. So what happened was cocaine was seized and it was lost, couldn't find it, whatever, it was gone, and so it was not able to be retested, weighed, or whatever. They knew about it, waited 8 months to tell the defense side that this has been missing. In the meantime, pushed and pressed for trial and plea deals and that kind of stuff, thus denying his defendant his opportunity to retest if he needed to, get it reweighed, do any kind of analysis on this evidence he wanted himself. So, and that's the issue. It wasn't like it was like a 1 minute delay or a 1 week delay or accidental. We're talking about 8 months of consistent denying, and we don't have it up until, now we disclose it.
Yeah, and again, this comes right on the heels of Charles Sebesta and what we, him getting disbarred. Now we have an allegation in civil district court asking essentially that they might ask for a disbarment of Healy given these allegations. Highly unlikely, but at least they've pleaded at this point.
Right, yeah.
We'll see what happens. I mean, this is a guy, he's been in elected position for a number of years now. He's very popular, really has not had a problem winning re-election. How do you guys think this affects his re-election chances?
Well, can I just add something quick to Damon's point? Doesn't this lawsuit go so far as to include additional information that he didn't provide? Not only did they misplace this cocaine and not inform anybody, but there were lab technicians that had problems and errors in their work in the lab, and he failed to disclose that information to the defense bar.
Right.
Failed to disclose it to defendants who had been convicted on that work, failed to disclose it to defense attorneys when they had current cases pending. I mean, this is a cover-up of forensic evidence and problems that lie within it. So we're not talking about one instance of conduct, we're talking about a pattern of conduct here.
Correct, and you're right. I didn't want to go that deep into it because you're absolutely correct. It was way more than just the one big piece of cocaine that was missing and analysis denied of the defendant. You're absolutely correct.
Well, we don't even know if it was cocaine because that's the point of it.
Correct.
This relates back to the Salvador issue that the crime lab technician was doing what they call dry labbing, right?
Right.
He was just going, oh, that's a white powdery substance, I'm going to call that cocaine. No forensic analysis whatsoever. And my understanding is, one of the articles that I read, I believe it was, I remember the young man's name was Jacob. His first name, his last name starts with an E. I can't remember. But Jacob spent a significant amount of time in TDC on a sentence before, about 8 or 9 months later, Mr. Healy's office finally got around to sending him and his counsel notice that, hey, there was dry labbing going on. We don't have to know that that was actually cocaine, and it's all been destroyed since you pled guilty in this case. There's no way to independently verify that. So, I think, and from what I understand, is that was a more central lab, and the notices went out by all the other district attorneys' offices, made decisions to notify all the defendants who were affected by that. John Healy, for whatever reason, I can't think of any malicious reason, drug his feet and didn't notify people for 8 to 9 months.
Well, and I think that goes into an even bigger issue of, here we have on the heels of Anthony Graves, Michael Morton, the Michael Morton Act, and we still have these issues in suburban Houston coming up, and I know all of us probably at some point have practiced out in Fort Bend County, and it seems to me that the problem out there is systemic, not just from a disclosure of Brady evidence as you had here and laboratory results and technician problems, but just even getting discovery out there seems to be like pulling teeth. I mean, you can file your 3914, your Michael Morton Act request, and it's sat on for months.
We had a hearing out there about a month and a half ago in Judge Lowry's court, County Court 3.
Right.
And I was called as one of about half a dozen witnesses to testify about my experiences getting discovery under the new 3914 or the Michael Morton Act in other counties versus Fort Bend County. And there were, Wilvin Carter testified, there were other attorneys who testified who practiced as far away as El Paso and Tarrant County and Amarillo. And they all testified that getting discovery from any other district attorney's office that they do work in is night and day different than Fort Bend County. And I was asked repeatedly on direct and cross-examination if I could give any explanation for that. The only thing I can come up with is, in every office I've worked in, management sets the tone. Management tells you how you're going to operate and how you're going to behave with the people who you're interacting with, be it opposing counsel or your coworkers. And there's no reason to believe that those kinds of delay tactics are not coming from the top down, in my opinion.
And that's certainly it, Justin. Everything comes from the top down in a prosecutor's office. Having worked in a prosecutor's office under a couple different elected DAs, under Johnny Holmes, under Chuck Rosenthal, it is set from the top down. And here you have a case where the prosecutor has a duty, an ethical duty, to disclose problems in their own case whenever they learn of those problems. And so we don't have to wait for that problem to be verified. We don't have to wait till somebody looks at it and says, oops, that's really not cocaine. As soon as there's think about it like when a person gets arrested, there's a probable cause standard. So we say this person may have been involved in a crime, a crime's been committed, and we have probable cause to believe this particular person is the defendant in the case, so he gets arrested. The prosecutor's office doesn't have to wait for confirmation on the error. When they learn there's an error or they learn that there's a credibility issue with witnesses, they don't get to decide, do we believe that or do we not believe that? They have to turn it over to the defense and let the defense investigate it themselves.
Right.
So that's what's happening here is you've got the prosecutor's office via John Healy all the way down pushing an agenda that says we're going to wait and see what happens with all these cases. We're going to wait and see what happens with the lab before we tell anybody. And that's just not the way it works. The prosecutor's supposed to disclose the evidence so that everybody can look at it, everybody can get their own analysis done and decide if it's good evidence or bad evidence. And he foreclosed everybody from doing that for about an 8-month period.
Right.
While all other prosecutors, like you said, other jurisdictions are disclosing that evidence.
Right, and they did it timely.
Harris County did it within a couple weeks of getting that information. Right. Brazoria County, everybody but Fort Bend.
Right.
Fort Bend just sat on it.
What does this do in terms of his electability the next go-round?
It's so here's the deal. Fort Bend is Republican and conservative, and he suits that bill to the T.
Sure.
He's law and order. He won this time, no problem, against, I believe, Dawn Wright, I believe she ran against him, not a problem. I think what this is systematic of a lot of issues in Fort Bend and other places that is coming to light. It used to be, prior to me practicing law, most cases with the DA's office was a cop as your witness, maybe some pseudoscience about guns, and that's it. But now you have forensic labs, you have all this DNA work and blood work and evidence and all this kind of stuff. And I think the DA's office, to a point, doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know if it's ours to protect, is it attorney-client privilege or whatever. Now we get to the point now, I think people are starting to see and are tired of seeing prosecutors hiding evidence, and it's silly. Turn it over, let it be done. I think people are tired of seeing over and over Sebesta, Michael Morton. Now this, why? And you scale it back and think, why'd you hide that? Well, just give it up and see what happens. You might have still got the conviction. You might have retested and it was still cocaine. Okay, that happens. People sell cocaine. So I think at this point, he will be reelected unless the state bar steps in and says, no, sir, your license is suspended for a little bit, in which case he can't be reelected. We'll see. But I honestly think they will still vote for him because he's still pushing that law and order agenda.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines, have y'all have more experience in this kind of work than I do, but have y'all ever heard of or seen of a sitting elected district attorney who was the state bar came after like this?
No, they didn't even come after Chuck Rosenthal.
Right,
with all
they
his
didn't.
ills.
Yeah,
Right.
Chuck Rosenthal had a plethora of problems, admitted to being under the influence of narcotics when making major decisions on death penalty cases, and the state bar said, it's not really a big deal. He lost the election over that, and he stepped down, and didn't run then, so he was out. And so the state bar kind of said, no harm, no foul. And then all of a sudden, what we saw was with Michael Morton, we have Williamson County electing the Republican DA, and all of a sudden saying, you know what, we've had enough. The elected DA should not be hiding evidence.
Right.
It's not their job to decide what evidence is available and what's not.
You're a
They
civil
throw
servant.
it all
You work
out
for
there.
us.
Right.
Well, they work for the taxpayer, and their
Exactly.
job is to make sure that the right people are charged, the right people are convicted, and that justice is done. Justice is done by laying your cards on the table and letting someone decide, is that enough evidence to convict another person?
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to avoid, is laying those cards out on the table.
Well, and speaking of that, I want to use this to kind of move into our next topic, because this week Anthony Graves was named to the board of the new Houston Crime Lab, I guess is the best way to call it. Their name is too long to repeat here repeatedly, but we'll just call it the new Houston Crime Lab. But he was appointed to the board. He is a non-lawyer, obviously. He is the first, I think, non-lawyer on the board.
He's the first ex-prisoner on a crime lab board.
Correct. Yeah, and so I mean, this is a big step, in my opinion, that we get somebody who was wrongfully convicted of forensic, evidence, of bogus forensic evidence, now sitting on the board and advising and going through this stuff. I mean, this is historic, isn't it, guys?
I think it's powerful, and I think it's even more powerful it's good for us because you have somebody who I think probably will be above political influence or just influence. I mean, having spent so many years in prison, this man is not going to want to see anybody falsely accused and convicted of a crime. And he's not going to want to see what happened to him happen to anyone else. And I think we're all defense attorneys here, and so we all feel like we don't want anybody falsely convicted. I think that's a very common sentiment amongst most people.
Right.
But we haven't lived it. And I think Mr. Graves, having lived that, he's going to be acutely attuned to their procedures and policies and alert to it, and he would be a better watchdog for the crime lab than anyone else.
And you got it right there, Damon, when you say he's a watchdog. That's what all the labs in the local area have been missing for so many years. There is no watchdog. There's no one looking over them except the DA's office.
Right.
Who's now getting in trouble for helping out the labs.
Talk about fox in the hen house, right?
So it's the fox in the hen house thing, and so now you've got an independent board looking over this crime lab. I'm not saying they got it perfect, but that is one hell of a step in the right direction to put an innocent person who was wrongfully convicted on that board to help oversee and watch to make sure that citizens are protected.
Well, it seems to me is that it adds credibility, too, in the sense that here you have a guy who, and we've had Anthony on the show. He is about as credible as it gets in terms of even though when you listen to him speak, and I encourage everybody out there, you can find a ton of speeches from Anthony online. You can see a lot of his programs. Go listen to him. And I think you will come away with the same thing that Damon and I came away with when we interviewed him, and that is that he's not, even through all he's been through, he's not biased.
And he's not bitter.
And he's not bitter.
He's not bitter, he's not vengeful, he's just out to see that this doesn't happen again.
Right.
Right.
You know, he's a down-to-earth person, great personality, super great to talk to, and just comes across very sincere and honest.
Do we, and I don't know how, but do more, let's say, does the DA's office, I know there's been talk in the past theoretically that perhaps the U.S. Supreme Court should have a non-lawyer justice on it, that it should, one of the 9 should be a non-lawyer justice for that very reason.
Settle for a criminal defense attorney, but yeah.
But I mean, there's been talk like that our legal system does need more non-lawyer participation in it. This is kind of the first step that I've seen. I mean, do you guys have any ideas of how we can make that more prevalent? And is that a good step in the direction to have more non-lawyers participate in our criminal justice system?
I think that I see what you're saying, and I don't like to sound elitist or have our systems of governance be elitist, but in my office sometimes we talk about our frustration with juries and how we feel like jurors are maybe just as average citizens, maybe lack some qualifications when it comes to understanding some of the nuances in the law when it comes to close calls. And I don't know how I feel about that because I like to be a populist or think of myself as one, and I don't like there to be a hierarchy of people who can make decisions for people or gatekeepers and things like that. But I don't know. I mean, we're dealing with some pretty difficult and nitty-gritty things, and I worry that people who don't have, because let's be frank, I mean, law school doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer. It just teaches you how to research the law and how to understand how the law works. And when you understand that, you can kind of understand, there's some legal opinions you read about, and you're like, okay, personally, I disagree with that, but I understand why the ruling was made the way it was.
And I understand your point, but I think my point where I'm coming at it is that if you start to bring in more independent people who are not lawyers, who are not part of the system, and I hate to use the air quotes, but what happens oftentimes, and we've all seen it, is that when you get caught up in this system, there's cronyism at play. I mean, you see it in all walks of the justice system, not just on the criminal side, but on the civil side and on the family law side and the juvenile side. You see cronyism at play. And what I'm wondering is if that by bringing in non-lawyers, people who are not beholden to the elected officials necessary, but put there as watchdogs, as you say. I mean, is this something that we need to step back and kind of reevaluate and say this might be a good thing in a lot of elected offices?
I would say yes and no. I think for the crime lab, it's a great thing because I don't think you need to be a lawyer to be on the board for the crime lab.
Right.
All of us have experienced crime in some form or fashion. We've either committed it or we've been victims of it. So
Speak for yourself on committing it. I'm not going to admit to anything.
I watched you speed over here. So, but we all have in some ways been involved in crime. And so I don't think you need to be a lawyer for that. I can echo Justin's sentiments for the Supreme Court. And in that situation, you're dealing with such high-level law that even lawyers have a hard time understanding and need other lawyers to teach them. And so it's not like the law, maybe it should be, but it's not like the law really can be understood by everybody.
Well, and you're dealing with a lot of social issues. As we've seen this week, we had Obamacare come. We expect a gay marriage decision at some point, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps early next week. You have a lot more social issues, too.
But those social issues are still vested in a legal principle.
Right.
And you can't make a social, a change to law or a new law based purely on social issues. There has to be some basis in legal principle or legal fact. And so I'm not opposed to civilian oversight or non-professional oversight on different situations, but I think like with doctors, with engineers, accountants, lawyers, certain things need to be part of, you need to have a certain basis of knowledge to make rules governing those people.
Yeah.
At least in that sense.
And if I can chime in a little bit here too, just like you said, I think the crime lab's a great place for this to happen. So you have some civilian oversight. Another place we see this is in some of the police review boards. You know, and that's been very effective. It's been very helpful. You know, when a accused officer has to stand before, you know, his tribunal, if you will, it's kind of, he has to report on his conduct. If you have citizens that are overseeing that and helping make the decision, we don't end up with, police helping police.
Yeah.
And we have the general public keeping an eye out, making sure they're following the rules. And that's been a great thing across the nation.
Well, I just think, having met him, interviewed him, I think this appointment is a great step in the right direction, and I think it really is going to help give this new crime lab some credibility, because we've all kind of speculated and wondered about the credibility of it and whether it's just a rehashing under a new name of the old regime. So I'm really looking forward to this and really am encouraged at the progress we're making.
I want to ask, though, before we switch subjects,
Yeah.
does anybody here have any information, and I don't, about what kind of oversight the board is actually going to have over the technicians? I mean,
You mean in terms of independence or?
well, how are they going to know if the information that they're getting from, if you have a tech who's doing dry labbing or who isn't properly calibrating their instruments, if they just bring them a report saying we found this much cocaine in the samples that we tested in the last 30 days, I mean, how does,
Well,
I don't know, and I probably
think
should
that's
know.
part of the issue with bringing somebody like Anthony in who will ask questions.
Who asks
and ask the
questions.
tough questions. You
Yeah,
put those
and
lab techs in there, and you have a hearing before the board, just like any Senate or congressional hearing. You bring that person up there and you say, look, I got questions about this report you did. You did X, Y, and Z, but you say you did X, Y, and Z, but I see X, but I don't see Y and Z. And I think somebody like Anthony will hold people's feet to the fire and can be good on that issue.
I agree with you on that. I've spent a lot of time with Anthony. I've met him several times, and I think that he's, if you're going to have someone take that role on, he's a fantastic person.
And hopefully he will encourage the other people on the board to ask those tough questions
Sure.
and not be scared to ask those questions. But enough about that. I want to move to our good governor. He doesn't have a nickname yet. We got to come up with Perry had
I have one,
governor
but I can't
Good
say
hair,
it. I can't
yeah.
say it
we,
on the
we,
air.
we don't have a good nickname for Governor Abbott yet, but a lot of activity this week. He signed some bills into law. He vetoed several other criminal bills. What I want to talk about first is the bills he did sign into law this week, and the first one that actually has become law, or actually he signed it last week, but it is the open carry law that we discussed 2 weeks ago when we were on air about the impending signature of it. It's now law. We now
It's not
have,
effective yet, so please don't carry your gun.
right, yeah.
Yet,
Let's
but
make that clear. You can't go open carrying your weapons yet. It's not open season in Texas right now, but it will be come September 1st. And so I want to start there because we're going to have a lot of people who probably see the news in the next 90 days. How many people do you think are going to go walking around with a pistol strapped on their side before it actually takes effect?
Well, this is Texas.
Right.
Texas loves guns. Mm-hmm. They're all going to be carrying guns. And I hate to make that sound facetious, but that's where we're headed, and that's the reason this particular legislation was popular. I mean, obviously, it has its critics, but that's why it's popular. That's why the Senate and House passed it, and that's why the governor signed it. And there's a lot of merit behind, I'd rather see what's coming at me than have it hidden from me.
And there's the flip side of that if you are, really want to maintain your level of defense, you don't want to let your enemy know what you have.
or to target you.
Yeah.
Actually, so I respectfully disagree with you, JoAnne. I don't think there will be a lot more people open carrying guns. So when we talk about concealed handguns, right now, if you have a concealed handgun, it needs to be concealed. So if it's not showing, but you can clearly see a gun's in your back pocket, then you're getting in trouble for that. I think what happened now is people won't care so much about it. So there's a lot of tech at gun shows about how to have a concealed handgun on your waist that you can't tell is there. So you can walk around with a concealed handgun and people not know there's a gun on your waist. I think what happened now is people won't care. They probably won't brandish it like out and out, like a revolver, like you would at the Wild Wild West. But I think you'll see a lot more outlines of pistols and things on people's clothing. But those same guys have always been carrying guns.
Sure.
And so that probably won't change much. And then the next thing I think is funny is everyone I've talked to who likes guns, like myself, is a proponent of guns, is not a proponent of open carry. I think it's a very dangerous situation. I think one of the things my wife told me, JoAnne, thank you, is it creates a situation where people are desensitized to guns. So right now, if we go somewhere and we see somebody carrying a gun, we will look at that person. We may not approach them, we may not be scared of them, but we will all have eyes fixed on that person because they have a gun. And so we don't know what they're going to do. 10 years from now, we may not care so much if people have guns walking around, which opens up the door to one of those crazies pulling a gun and shooting us. And I think that's a scary thought to have out there.
Well, and my concern right now goes to the fact that we've had all this news, we've had the big show about the governor signing this bill into law, and just from a purely educational standpoint, it seems like the government is doing a poor job right now educating people on what the current state of the law is. And you can't open carry today, right now.
Not yet.
And so that's what I'm saying is this: we have this gap. He signs it today, but we've still got 75, 80 days till it actually becomes law. And, good for the work of criminal defense lawyers, but there seems to be a big gap in here in the signing of the bill and the education and saying, look, people, we're signing this bill, but bam, 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 it's September 1. You better not carry or you're going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Well, I agree, and I have a couple of things on that I want to say. First of all, I believe Governor Abbott signed this law into effect in Dallas, traveled to Dallas to do it there, and he did it a day after there was a shooting at right outside of a Dallas police department, which seemed a little bit short-sighted on his part. It was also a couple of weeks before the tragedy that we had in South Carolina last week, and I can't help but wonder if someone goes into a church with the ill intent and they're displaying their weapon, if now people are going to have to, by some legal standard, not be able to exclude that person from a meeting, from a prayer meeting or something where a gun is inappropriate. And I know we'll come back to that topic in a little bit, but my main question is, for people who have more experience doing criminal law than I do, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. You don't necessarily have to shoot the person with the weapon. You can display the weapon in a threatening manner,
That's right? Yep.
Right.
So if you're allowed to have a gun on your hip that no longer has to be concealed, and you get into an argument with somebody over a parking spot, and you pull your jacket back and just show your gun, are you now facing a second-degree felony or a first-degree felony?
Well, that's entirely possible that you could be, and it's just like you said a moment ago, it has to be displayed in a threatening manner, used or exhibited in a threatening manner. So what's threatening? If I'm walking around, it's on my hip, who cares? It's not a threat. Now, if you and I are in an argument, I pull my jacket back and I prominently show you what's here, now we're talking a little more aggressive, a little bit more threatening, and that's what our juries decide.
Right. And that's my concern, is that I can understand the rationale behind saying, you know what, if you want to carry a gun on your hip, that's fine, but it has to be concealed. Because the moment you pull that out and it's not a self-defense situation, you're now committing a felony of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in certain circumstances.
Well, yeah,
and
but
now all of a sudden we have a legislature who's passing laws thinking about Second Amendment rights and rah, gun rights without thinking about, well, hold on, how is this going to affect more people getting charged with crimes? And I, as a criminal defense attorney, I'm not looking at my bottom line and encouraging law enforcement to be more active in arresting people. I'm trying to protect citizens from being unlawfully arrested.
Well,
and that's one concern that I would have there.
And I think it's actually potentially going to lead to less citizens getting arrested. Right now, you have somebody that has a concealed gun. I reach around on the store shelf and my shirt comes up, and and now all of a sudden I'm getting arrested for having a gun. Mm-hmm. If it's out there and it's allowed to be out there, then I'm not getting arrested for that gun. You're going to have to tie the police, tie the prosecutors, tie juries into, was it displayed in a threatening manner?
Right.
And so I think it could result in far fewer arrests. Right now, people see the gun that came out of nowhere and it's, I was threatened by it. Well, you got to look at the circumstances, but it's not necessarily a threat just because you saw it. So I think it'll help.
I don't know if it'll help. I think, like most things, if you're the intended target audience for this bill, it'll help you. Jimmy, Justin, JoAnne, y'all be fine. Y'all show y'all's weapons out in public, you'll be A-okay. I feel like if Damon walks, no.
Yeah, and I agree.
I feel like if I walk in someplace and I've got a gun on my hip and I have my CHL and my open carry license, which you need both of them, by the way.
You need the concealed carry license, which allows you to
CHL to then get an open carry, but you have to have an open carry license as well.
Right.
One does not automatically get you the other one. But if I have both of them on there, on me, on my hip, I become threatening. because I'm a black man.
Well, I think we've seen
Let's be
that on
real.
the YouTube videos
Yeah,
on the internet
certainly.
how
Yeah.
about
Certainly you're going to face
how the open carry law is treated differently based on
Completely.
the color of your skin.
Completely.
The YouTube video.
In
Absolutely.
YouTube,
right?
we had it
That's
on
in
the show.
Oregon,
That's not
right?
gonna change.
This progressive, forward-thinking state, supposedly.
Right.
And you have a white guy who's walking around with an MR or
AR-15.
AR-15, some assault rifle on his back.
Yep.
White police officer comes up to him, just says, "Hey, what's going on?" He
you doing?
says, "Oh, I'm just displaying my gun, taking a walk." And he's like, "Okay, no problem." A young black man does it with, I think he's got like braids or dreads or something, and an officer doesn't say a word. Parks his Tahoe in the middle of the street, pulls his handgun out, and just trains it on the guy and just holds it on him and says, "Get on the ground." And his pregnant girlfriend's walking on the street behind him recording
The whole
this.
thing.
And he has to get on the ground. Multiple officers come on the scene. They take the gun off of him, and it's the same neighborhood. It's the same time of day. It's the same gun.
You know, and you're right about that, Justin, but that's not a problem that's unique, as Damon can tell you too, it's not a problem that's unique to guns. We see these every single day in court where the probable cause for a stop is walking on the street where a sidewalk is provided.
Absolutely.
I walk in the street in my neighborhood every day. Nobody says jack to me about it.
And they wouldn't.
And there's a sidewalk right there.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, Damon, you might come walk down my street and the local security officer's going to come right after you.
Absolutely. I don't doubt that.
You know, and that's just the unfortunate thing, that it's a societal problem. It's not a gun problem. It's a cop problem. They haven't learned to distinguish thugs from people.
And that's a theme I want to come back to. We've reached 8:30, and I want to remind our viewers, we're opening up our phone lines right now. Numbers at the bottom of your screen, 713-807-1794. Call us with your questions or any comments you'd have. We'd love to hear from you. Also, we're still waiting on the Twitter world here. Keep your comments and any questions you have coming on there at HCCLA_TV. I want to talk about a couple more laws that came into effect, and obviously I want to move into the big topic, the elephant in the room, and that being South Carolina. But couple other laws that he signed into effect, Governor Abbott did. First, the decriminalization of truancy in Texas, and second, this new interlock device that goes into effect. Both of these go into effect September 1. Let's talk first about the truancy bill, because this, I read a stat that Texas last year alone prosecuted something like 115,000 people for truancy, and by far and away led the nation in truancy prosecutions. And now we're going to finally decriminalize prosecutions. Much like we said Anthony Graves was a step in the right direction on the crime board, I think this is a huge step in the right direction for the way we handle this area of the law.
It is. It's a huge step. If you go into the Juvenile Justice Center today, you will see posters all down the vestibule and all through the first floor of the Juvenile Detention Center, which is where parents go to see their kids that are in the detention center. Posters all over the wall. It's a crime for you, it's a crime for your kids. You know, it's a crime for your kid, it's a crime for the parent, and it kind of spins them both ways. You know, I understand we want our kids in school,
Right.
but it's not a criminal problem that they can't go to school for whatever reason, or that they don't go to school for whatever reason. And I know we want to hold parents responsible for their children's conduct, but calling the parent a criminal because their child didn't go to school that day, that's just, it's absurd.
It is. And we have other methods of dealing with this, don't we?
We do, and to me, this bill, at its inception, like zero tolerance at its inception, had a good idea, had a good root. Like it makes sense. Parents, don't be lazy and let your kids not go to school. If you don't make them go to school because they're kids, then we're going to get you in trouble. You're going to get in trouble behind it. That's something we can all get behind. We all want our kids to go to school and be happy, and we don't want kids walking around not being productive. Likewise, zero tolerance. Hey, we're going to take away the biasness of drugs. If you have drugs in school, everybody's getting in trouble for it. Zero tolerance. And it sounds good. But in reality, it is stupid, because you have things that should not be penalized being penalized. You have people becoming criminals who should not be criminals. And it takes away from just basic common sense and letting people, letting your common sense dictate. There are some parents who should be in trouble for not getting their kids to school. There are some kids who need to go to jail to learn to go to school. But that's not every kid. And it certainly isn't 115,000 cases worth of that stuff. I mean, that's silly. And so I'm glad that we've taken a step back towards common sense and personal responsibility and not having the government reach into your life so deeply for this silliness.
I'm sure at the same time the legislature passed that legislation, they went ahead and diverted the funds that went to prosecuting 115,000 cases to the schools to make them a little bit more tolerable, right?
Oh yeah,
Of course.
absolutely. Next bill Governor Abbott signed, and I want to go to you first, Justin, because I know you do a lot of DWI work. The interlock device. Tell us a little bit about this new law that's going to come onto the books with regard to the interlock device that was just signed. We have he's now, the governor has signed this bill, making it that you're going to have an interlock device if you're going to even drive in your license suspension. How does that change your practice, or in all of our practices, and the client's situations?
You know, I need to look at this law real specifically, because the way I read it is the way you said it, is when you have a suspension from, I'm guessing this is an administrative suspension related to either refusing to provide a breath or blood sample or providing one that ends up being over the legal limit.
Right.
If that's the case in Harris County, you already, when your license is suspended from that, you're eligible for what's called an occupational driver's license. On DWI first offenders in Harris County, 99% of the judges, I'm not going to name the wonderful judges that don't, will require an interlock on your car as a condition of the occupation. Now, if you have a DWI second or third, statutorily an interlock is required as a condition of bond. So whether your license is suspended or not is one thing. Now, in my office, we have a very, very high success rate of winning those driver's license hearings for our clients and keeping them validly driving at the time. But judges still often, more often than not, will saddle them with an interlock.
And the way I understand it, it's not just from administrative. It just said, the way I read it was just suspension. So this could be even after a conviction.
Right.
You get the criminal court suspending your license for a year or whatever, that it's now mandatory. You're going to have this interlock device on your car.
Well, I mean, how it's going to affect practice, I haven't quite figured out, but how it's going to affect people I can talk to you about, because I deal with these issues with my clients on a daily basis. These devices are by no means faultless. Okay, let me put it this way. Can you think of any other major part that you can put in any car that is just one size fits all? We can install this device in any car and it will go into the computer and it will affect the ability for the car to start and run. There's no other part other than the air freshener that you can buy for your car that is universal in all makes and models.
Well, being a car junkie that I am, and the gearhead that I am, I have never put an aftermarket part on my car that has always worked seamlessly.
Sure.
So I can only imagine not having ever been in the experience of having an interlock device, but having monkeyed with my car on several occasions to put in aftermarket stereos and things.
And then you have to turn the stereo off after you turn the car off.
Right, yeah. I mean, it just never seems to work seamlessly with the original equipment.
Right.
So,
And
Now
these
imagine having your freedom tied to that situation. I mean, somebody's getting rich off this.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is a follow the money problem.
all it is.
This is lobbyists for the folks that make and sell these interlocks, getting to our legislature to say, you know what, we're not putting enough of these on the streets. Follow the money.
That's all it is.
And so now we're going to legislate that everybody's going to have one in their car if their license is suspended at all.
regardless of how many times. Yeah, if you've ever been convicted before.
Don't worry if you've been convicted before.
Or if you're guilty or not at this time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's even more to the point, I'm wondering what stats they use to show some kind of recidivism rate amongst people charged with DWI, suspended, reoffending. You know what I mean?
You know, and that's an interesting comment when you say that, and I hate to interrupt you there, Damon, but you said this, looking at the recidivism rate. I was just in the Harris County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council meeting where we discussed recidivism rates in Harris County, and locally DWI has the lowest recidivism rate out of all crimes in Harris County for those people placed on probation. They are only 7 to 10% of at risk of recidivism, where other offenses we're looking at 40 to 60% recidivism rate.
Which goes to my point right there, JoAnne. There's no reason for this at this junction. Certainly for your seconds and above, absolutely. Maybe, absolutely.
Repeat offenders, yes.
Absolutely, no sympathy. But for your first timers who may, like Justin said, may not even be guilty, nevertheless, to have this device in your car, I mean, what's going to happen is you're going to have all your your internet companies pumping out these devices, these techs installing it haphazardly because they got to do it all across. Unfortunately, Houston has the largest DWI caseload, I guess. So
Right.
they're going to have a lot of work to be done. Doing it haphazardly. You have to go to court because, now we have these faulty hits on your client's bond, and now we have bond hearings on whether or not they actually tested. And today my client had cologne on, and that can cause a false positive. Oh, he forgot not to use mouthwash today, and that's your false positive. I mean, it's a lot of silly stuff that's to be useless. I mean, it's just about money.
Yeah.
And it's just about money.
Spicy food, chapstick, certain teas can set these things off.
Poppy seeds.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And not only are you having the device and a follow the money and that kind of thing, but in Harris County and every other county that I've seen, when you get one of these installed, you then get set up on bond supervision. Okay, now you have basically someone who's under the Community Supervision and Corrections Department, CSCD, which is the fancy term for probation department. You have someone you have to check in with every month who may give you a urine test, and you also have to pay for that privilege to be supervised, $40 to $60 a month.
Well,
That's probation.
You're paying $40 to $60 to be supervised, and you're
Plus
paying
the fee
up
for
to $100 for the device in your car every month.
Well, and the new portable ones are about $118. The
Yeah.
Scram bracelets or the ankle bracelets are more than my car payment. They're $400 a month.
Somebody went up to the legislature and flashed the Johnny Football signal.
And it worked.
That's what I say. It's
I mean,
follow the
it's-
money.
It's right
Classic follow the money.
there. We got about 15 minutes left. I want to turn to the big topic because we can't go without talking about the shooting that occurred in South Carolina last week. And I don't pretend to, for any means, to say that in the next 15 minutes we can solve all the world's problems on this issue, because Lord knows there are multiple issues on this topic. The criminal case that this young man is going to be facing, where the governor has already come out and said we want to seek the death penalty on this young man. The race issues, the Confederate flag issues, and what it means, whether it should be taken down, whether it shouldn't be taken down, what to do with the rest of Confederate history. There are a lot of issues on this. And so I just kind of want to start the dialogue, because I think this is going to be a topic that we're going to be revisiting for a lot of shows, because this is not the last time we're going to talk about this. But I kind of want to get you guys' thoughts first on the death penalty aspect of it, because we've had a lot of people on this show, from Catherine Case to Lisa Falkenberg to Anthony Graves. We've all dealt with death penalty issues on this case, on this show. I mean, and we've discussed it a number of times. We talked about, and coincidentally, Joe Karsanayev, the Boston bomber, was officially sentenced to death by the federal judge in Boston this week. I kind of see this, and I want to get you guys' thoughts on it, similar to Tsarnaev. This guy is essentially a terrorist.
Nah, I wouldn't say essentially. I mean, he is.
He's a local
Yeah.
terrorist.
Domestic
Yeah,
terrorism.
domestic terrorism.
Homegrown domestic
That's what it is.
terrorist.
He didn't have a bomb. I mean, all he's missing was a bomb, and then
Right.
we have our actual terrorist. I've said before in the show, I'm not really for the death penalty, but I do believe there are times where you can do something so heinous to forfeit your right, and now you merit the death penalty. I think in this case, this is one of them, and it's not just because he killed 9 people, and for me, it's not even because he killed them in a church, which is equally bad and reminds me of things I've learned about my Black history in this country, but that he drove an hour away. He sat during a prayer service. He went there and prayed with these people and talked to them and felt remorse for what he was about to do, and still did it, and then still did it with anger.
Right.
I mean,
He supposedly said something like, "I'll give you something to pray for."
Exactly. Like he prayed with them, he felt sorry, and then he still did it. I gave him something to pray for, and then cussed them out, and then spoke all the racial rhetoric we just so used to hearing. I showed absolutely no remorse. I think for me, that last little piece, man, just to go to a place of worship, to actually pray with people, to hold hands with them, listen for an hour and pray with them, to feel sorry, get over it, and then go right back to anger. I definitely think at this point, if he gets a death penalty, I will not be upset.
Well, the term depraved heart comes to mind for me. That this guy may be the ultimate definition of depraved heart. I mean, I know we've had a lot of examples throughout history, but in terms of right now, this guy seems to be the poster child for it. Like you said, as the family members are sitting there and basically saying, as he's facing his probable cause hearing, we forgive you, he's just checked out.
I wouldn't forgive him.
Checked out totally. And so that's kind of the definition or the word that comes to mind for me. How about y'all?
It is. I think you hit it exactly right there when you say depraved heart. This appears to be someone that is cold, calculating, unremorseful, without a redeeming quality. I'm not going to say, I hope his attorneys do find that redeeming quality. It's possible that it's out there, but it's certainly not being portrayed that way.
Right.
And we do hear a little bit about, could it have been the medications he's on? Is it the psychosis? If that's there, then obviously that needs to be treated. But you're exactly right. It appears to be the depraved heart, someone that could sit down in a cold, calculating manner and kill a number of people.
Yeah.
And have no remorse for it.
I want to jump in here. I looked up define depraved heart, and Wikipedia is giving me a U.S. definition law that depraved heart is a depraved indifference as to human life and where such acts result in a death. This is more than that. This is an intentional extermination by this man. He has said he wanted to try to start a civil war. He didn't try to start a race war or whatever kind of war it is. People don't start that kind of war hoping to lose it. So whatever his goal was, if it was to off as many non-white people as he could, that's not an indifference to life. That's a I'm not coming up with the words I need right now, but that's the antithesis of someone who wants life to continue, and not just an indifference to it. But I think it's kind of going back to your question about the death penalty on this. I'm very strongly against the death penalty, and I'm not going to say but in this case. I'm very strongly against the death penalty. I don't think that the death penalty would be appropriate for any person, including this. However, a lot of research that has been done on the death penalty has shown that it's more often the bigger determination of whether someone gets the death penalty, or at least a prosecutor seeks the death penalty, is the race of the victim.
Right.
And when it comes down to what kind of lives matter, when the victim has been someone who's white, more often than not, they are the defendant is put on death row, or at least the prosecution seeks the death penalty. So in this is a test, I think, for the prosecutors in South Carolina who get this case, who have been rah, death penalty so long. Now you have 9 dead black people who were in a church. And if you don't seek the death penalty in this case, and you've sought it in other cases where the victim had a fairer skin, they've got some reckoning to do with not just the voters, but themselves and whoever their God is.
And on that note, Justin, one of the things that I found striking on social media, it didn't really make it into the mainstream news so much, but more on Facebook, Twitter, in that realm, was the comparison of how this young man was treated when he was arrested by the police officers versus any other black person that we've seen in recent history, such as
they took him to Burger King, right?
Burger King.
Right.
Just gonna say that.
Yeah, sorry.
They gave him his last meal. They took him out to eat.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen the video, but allegedly one of the cops fist bumped him. And I just don't know if that is appropriate for somebody who at this stage, who, still to this day, he's innocent. I believe that, not guilty, hasn't been convicted yet. But man, videotape evidence, his confession, it certainly appears like they have a good case against him to get Burger King and fist bumps by police officers on the way in.
And I see your point there, Damon, and I agree with it, but you have to, growing up in a police family, I saw this all the time. Police officers made arrests, white, black, Hispanic, Asian. They took those people through a fast food drive-through or whatever, got them a burger or something, because that's the fastest way to get them ingratiated to you and start getting a confession from them.
Right.
And this guy did confess.
That's a good point.
And this one did confess. So,
Give him a Whopper.
I don't see it's because he's a white guy, he got a Whopper. I've seen it my whole life with police officers in my family that no matter who the suspect is, you go get them a burger, you sit down and talk to them, buy them a coffee, you be nice to them because they're going to help you when you help them.
And I was thinking that same thing, but I think when police are dealing with a non-white shooter in these types of situations, their first reaction is not necessarily let's get our confession by going, we can catch more flies with honey than vinegar. No, they're like, you know what, let's do whatever heavy-handed tactic we can do. And I'm not saying that your family in any way, JoAnne. I have a lot of law enforcement in my family, and I do have an uncle who's no longer with us who used to tell me stories that now make me angry. But you know, I do think that is a totally valid tactic by police to try to break down someone's defenses, and the easiest way to do that is through their stomach. And especially if he's out there hungry and they're in a Burger King parking lot next to where they pulled him over, yeah, we can run through there real quick. Now, I gave you the burger. You're going to tell me what I need? I get that. But I don't think that that's always police officers' first reaction when you're dealing with someone who's not white. It's
certainly not always their reaction. But I would have to say that becomes, at least in my opinion, an individual officer issue. I think it paints too broad a picture to say, all black guys are mistreated when they're arrested by white cops. It just paints too broad a picture. And it's too broad a picture to say, and the white guy always gets the break on the arrest.
I agree with
I've seen plenty of white guys, my own clients, that have gotten a beating on the way to jail, you know, or what have you. So, you know, it cuts both ways, but I think there are certainly bad officers out there. We see them all the time. I'm getting in trouble on Facebook all the time when I point them out from, you know, friends and relatives that are police officers. They say, well, you're always picking on the police. And I said, no, I'm picking on the bad ones. Mm-hmm. The bad ones are out there, and those are the ones that are doing this type of behavior. Right. And, you know, possibly picking on somebody because they're black, because they themselves have race issues.
Right.
Is this the case? And I don't know. I mean, it seems like all this stuff, we've got more stuff coming out on Freddie Gray in Baltimore in terms of the conduct of the officers there. But is this the case, given the cold-heartedness of it, that finally moves the needle a little bit on race relations in this country? Do you think this may be one of those moments that we look back and say this was a turning point, that this case was, or does it have the potential for that, or is it just going to be? I mean, we've seen with Ferguson, with Baltimore, with New York, it really hadn't moved the needle that much in terms of race relations, the way police interaction with minorities has occurred. But this goes beyond it, because we're also getting into, as I talked about before, we're talking about the culture of the South and the culture of racism and hatred that has existed. And now that seems to be part of the conversation as well. So I'm wondering from you guys, is this the case that maybe moves the needle, not all the way, but at least starts to move it in the direction of change?
I think it has the potential to start the change. It definitely does, and especially the way that this situation was handled within the community. Mm-hmm. You didn't have riots, you didn't have uproar. You had, as Damon said, you had families standing there forgiving.
No, he said that. I said I wouldn't forgive him.
Oh, you said you wouldn't forgive him. But you did have families standing there saying, we forgive him for killing our family. You know, so you have a community that rose above his violence. So I think they can become the impetus for change.
We got a phone call coming in. I want to get to our callers, even though we're waiting until the last minute. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
Hey, it's Tyler Flood. How are you guys?
Hey, Tyler. Good. Thanks for calling in.
I was waiting for the right moment, but you said the magic word, culture of the South, the race that is still prevalent. I just wanted to talk about an issue with a case we've got in Orange, Texas, which, you know, is a very special place in Texas. We're near Vidor. And,
we only got a couple minutes left, Tyler, so I'm going to need you to kind of get it as briefly summarized as possible.
So we got a client that's a felony DWI, and we walk in the first day, sizing me up, and he's saying, why are you going to trial, and asking me questions. And I said, well, you know, and he wanted to figure out what might happen if we went to trial and the punishment. He said, well, is your client a white guy? I said, well, yes, sir, he is. He said, he'll probably be all right then. So that was just amazing to hear that from a judge, basing his decision on what the punishment would be before the trial on the race of my client. It was not a white guy, he might go to prison. If he was white, then he'd probably receive probation. But that still exemplifies the culture of the South, especially in East Texas.
No doubt. We appreciate the story, Tyler, and thanks for calling in.
Good show tonight, guys.
Well, absolutely.
I want to answer your question, Jimmy. The last time I can remember in the South, black church was attacked in such a way, ultimately led to the Civil Rights Act and
Right.
Voting Registration Act in Alabama. I think this is different from everything we've seen so far, which has been bad, because you have people not involved with police. No one can say these 9 people were criminals or in any way deserving of what happened to them.
Right.
Resisting and that kind of thing. They were in a place of God, which whether you're atheist or a deep believer, you can recognize, hey, maybe that's not the place to kill a bunch of people, if any such place exists. And then you have a situation where the community did rise and we all rose together. It wasn't like the black community just grieved and everyone else was like, well, why y'all crying? It was, we all agreed as one people together against this. So in response, you saw the Confederate flag come down, or starting to come down, which is started its own debate, but for, at least for me, I've always hated the flag. I've never understood why people said it means rebellion, or it means rebellion in a sense that's not like racist rebellion or civil rights rebellion. I mean, that's not a good flag to me. I don't see the flag and like feel good about being a Southerner. Actually, I see the flag and I say to myself, great, don't go into that bar, or don't talk to that guy, because now I know what to expect from him.
Well, I think, and I look, I've grown up in the South all my life, and being born in Louisiana and then moving here when I've been growing up here for all my life. I mean, I've been around it, and you grow up in that culture. But what I want to know is, it's akin to the swastika having become, in early times the swastika was a symbol of. A good symbol under the Roman Empire and all through the ages growing up, but the Nazis took that and made it into a symbol of evil. And regardless of whatever some people in this country may think of the Confederate battle flag, because it's not really the Confederate flag, the actual Confederate flag, you can go see it flying over the state capital of Texas, actually at Six Flags, but that has become a symbol of hate. And people have used it as hate. And I think, to your point, Damon, it's how people interpret it. And we should be more conscious of people's feelings. But do y'all think that that we can all agree that it should come off of any and all government buildings?
Well, yes. And
Absolutely.
I think
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt, off the government buildings.
Sure, and you have the Supreme Court case this week of saying that Texas is well within its rights as a government to say we don't have to issue license plates with the Confederate flag on it. I actually think that, going back to the question you asked a minute ago, Jimmy, about changes, a tipping point for society in this situation, I think that the tipping point is going to potentially come from all the retail businesses that have stopped selling, the large-scale retailers who stopped selling the Confederate flag memorabilia. Now, the big thing that I'm thinking here is what that means is it's going to be harder for the 15-year-old who turns 16 and wants to put a sticker on his truck to just go down to Walmart or go on Amazon and buy some stupid Confederate flag sticker. So now they're going to have to really seek it out. They're going to have to go to stormfront.org or whatever other white supremacist fringe groups that they can find. And then we're going to get to this. Now is going to be a label. Someone who's flying this flag or wearing this kind of symbol is like, you really sought that out. Like the shooter in South Carolina was wearing the apartheid flag of Rhodesia and South Africa. I mean, that's more than just the Confederate flag that you can buy down the store. I don't even know what the apartheid flag of South Africa or Rhodesia looks like.
Right.
You know, and this 21-year-old dude from the backwoods, I don't want to totally go with hyperbole, but from the backwoods of South Carolina is wearing those flags on himself. So
yeah. Well, it's been a great conversation tonight, JoAnne. I appreciate you joining us. Justin, I appreciate you coming in on the last minute. You did a great job tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Damon, as always, good job with the co-hosting duties tonight. We're having a good time here.
We're having fun now.
It's a good topic to discuss, and I think really is going to lead to a lot of good discussion here amongst us and our guests in the future, because we got a long way to go. But I want to thank y'all for watching tonight. Those of you who called in, Tyler Flood. Those of you who tweeted us some nice little hashtags, Jose Julio Vela. We appreciate you, and join us next week for another edition of Reasonable Doubt. Good night.